After the massive success Nintendo had with the Game Boy, a new successor was announced in 1995, calling it a 32-bit portable console that could play Super Nintendo caliber games, codenamed Project Atlantis. It was scheduled to be released in 1997, and design leader was Satoru Okada, who worked on the hardware of the original Game Boy. By then, it wasn't ready, and the Game Boy Color was released in 1998 to give developers more time. The Game Boy Advance was announced in 2000, and that phone, internet and system connectivity was a big priority, and they experimented a lot in Japan with the RANnet service that was also active on the Nintendo 64 DD. But when it was released worldwide in 2001, there were no internet features and the RANnet discontinued the same year. A lot of people made fun of the N-Gage for looking like a taco, but they never made fun of Nintendo for having a similar design on the Game Boy Advance. Like any Game Boy, it came in a lot of different colors. Obviously, this one's in purple. Oh, sorry, I mean indigo. It really suits the Game Boy Advance. I think Nintendo loved indigo in the early 2000s because it was the standard color for their systems. I like how the box brags about being 32-bit. This came out in 2001 and by then, nobody gave a shit about bits. The D-pad and action buttons are next to the screen. There's also left and right triggers up here for games like Donkey Kong King of Swing or F-Zero, and it makes it more comfortable. It's backwards compatible with Game Boy and Game Boy Color games without region locking, so you have thousands of games available, and at least 100 of them are really good, like Mario Kart Super Circuit. If you're playing an older Game Boy, you can change the aspect ratio with the trigger buttons. The size of this thing is almost identical to the Game Boy Color. It takes two AA batteries, and the screen is now 16:9, but as you can tell from this Gorilla style footage, there's still no backlight. If you're a video game collector or like the accessories the Game Boy Advance came with, like the e-reader, then it does a really good job. But if you're new to the Game Boy, or if you want to relive the nostalgic glory with your old games but don't have a Game Boy, the next system is the ultimate Game Boy. This is the best portable system Nintendo have ever made, the Game Boy Advance SP, and here's why. It was designed to address any issues the original Game Boy Advance had. Like the original model, it can play the entire Game Boy library without any region lock, so you have thousands of games. When you open it up, the button and screen layout is the same as the older Game Boy, with the addition of the trigger buttons and... light. Oh my god. The buttons themselves also feel light. It's like pressing the buttons on a PlayStation 4 console. I know, not the best example. And when you're done with it, you close it, the screen is protected, and it's half the size of the original Game Boy Advance, so it fits better in your pockets. They don't call it the Game Boy Advance Special for nothing. It's also rechargeable, so you don't have to buy dozens of batteries. It can do no wrong. Wait a minute, where's the headphone jack? I take that back, it can. Seriously, is there any legitimate reason why there's no headphone jack? All other Game Boy models did, even the Micro. If you're gonna design something based on user feedback, don't take away a basic feature. Also, all of the accessories like the e-reader couldn't be used, but I personally don't think it's a big deal because it didn't catch on, nor was it even released here. A couple of years later, the SP got an updated backlit screen. If you're wondering whether you have that model or not, the model name is under the Game Boy, AGS101. Some say it's the model to get, and they're probably right. But I don't know about that, because regardless of what SP model you have, if you play it in the dark and turn the light on, you will be able to see it. So apart from the absence of a headphone jack, you need another accessory for that, it's still the Game Boy to own, and one of my favorite video game consoles. Now this is one of the smallest gaming systems I've ever seen. Hard to believe it's an official Nintendo product, but it's simply a Game Boy Advance, and that's a good thing. This also has a really strong backlight, and it plays Game Boy Advance games. That's it. It doesn't play Game Boy or Game Boy Color games, which I can't put my head around unless this is too small to fit the technology for backwards compatibility. What Nintendo tried to do to make this popular was allow the front covers to be changed for your liking. It came bundled with two, and others can be purchased separately. But otherwise I wouldn't bother with this model because it isn't backwards compatible like the others. Even the Nintendo DS could play Game Boy Advance games. If you ever want to play the entire Game Boy library on your TV, get yourself a GameCube and attach a Game Boy player to it. Just remember, if you're on the market for one of these things, make sure you get the disc to go with it or it won't work. More the reason to have a Nintendo GameCube. Like the original Game Boy, there was practically no competition, selling over 81 million units in its 9-year life cycle. Nintendo know how to make a portable gaming console, and with titles including Pokemon, Metroid Fusion, Mario remakes, and Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, it had the quality games to back it up. Once the PlayStation Portable was released in 2004, Nintendo already responded with the DS, another system that didn't even need a target market. Whatever model you get, although the SP is the one I recommend, the Game Boy Advance is a really fun portable system by Nintendo that'll keep you entertained for life. Seriously, providing you have the games I mentioned before.